The aroma of roasted chicken and simmering gravy usually meant comfort, routine, the predictable rhythm of a Sunday afternoon. My wife's laughter, the clinking of silverware, the gentle hum of family chatter, it was the soundtrack to a life I'd built, a life I cherished. But then, across the polished mahogany table, our eyes met. Her gaze, sharp and unwavering, cut through the noise, through the sunlight, through every assumption I held about myself and my world. It wasn't a challenge, not overtly. It was an invitation, wrapped in a silent question, a promise of something dangerous and undeniably alluring. And in that single, fleeting moment, the comfortable foundations of my existence began to crack, whispering a temptation I knew, with a chilling certainty, I was utterly unprepared to resist. Before we dive deeper into this tangled web, if you're finding yourself intrigued by the mysteries unfolding, please consider hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications. It helps the channel grow and you won't miss a single twist in this story. The late autumn sun, a pale, benevolent orb, filtered through the large bay windows of Sophia's parents' dining room, casting long, warm shadows across the antique Persian rug. It was a quintessential Sunday in the suburbs of Connecticut. Crisp air outside, the scent of wood smoke faintly clinging to the breeze, and inside, the comforting chaos of a family lunch. Sophia's parents, Eleanor and Arthur, hosted these gatherings religiously, a tradition that had been a cornerstone of our 10 years together. I sat at the head of the table, a position of honor usually reserved for Arthur, but he'd insisted I take it today, citing a sudden urge to supervise the carving of the turkey from a more strategic vantage point. Sophia, my beautiful wife, was seated to my right, her hand occasionally brushing mine under the table as she recounted a humorous anecdote from her week at the architectural firm. Her blonde hair, usually pulled back in a professional bun, was loose today, framing a face alight with laughter. She was wearing a simple, elegant navy blue dress, and she looked radiant, effortlessly beautiful. To my left was Sophia's younger sister, Clara, a whirlwind of energy and sarcastic wit, currently engaged in a lively debate with her husband, David, about the merits of different craft beers. The table was laden with food: roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, and Eleanor's famous apple pie cooling on the sideboard. The air was thick with the aroma of home cooking, the clinking of silverware, and the happy din of conversation. It was, by all accounts, a perfect Sunday. I was a software engineer, my days typically spent immersed in lines of code and complex algorithms. These Sunday lunches were my anchor, a grounding force that pulled me back to the tangible human world. I loved Sophia deeply and unequivocally. Our life together was stable, comfortable, built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and a quiet, enduring affection. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our plans for the future, a future that felt as solid and predictable as the changing seasons. Then she arrived, Isabel, Sophia's cousin. She walked in a little late, as always, a whirlwind of apologies and charm. Isabel was Sophia's first cousin, but they were more like sisters, having grown up together. She was a freelance photographer, a free spirit who lived in New York City, and her visits were always an event. She brought with her an energy that was both vibrant and slightly disruptive, a splash of metropolitan chic in our suburban calm. She was wearing a fitted black turtleneck and dark jeans, a stark contrast to the more subdued attire of the rest of the family. Her dark, wavy hair cascaded around her shoulders, and her eyes, a striking shade of emerald green, seemed to absorb all the light in the room. She moved with an effortless grace, a natural magnetism that drew every eye. Sorry, traffic was a nightmare," she exclaimed, her voice a rich, smoky alto as she hugged Eleanor and Arthur. Then she moved to Sophia, embracing her warmly. "Soph, you look amazing." Sophia laughed, genuinely pleased. "Isabel, glad you made it. Come sit, we just started." Isabel's gaze swept across the table, acknowledging everyone with a quick, bright smile, and then her eyes landed on me. Our eyes met across the table, and in that instant, the noise of the room seemed to fade, the sunlight dimmed, and the comfortable rhythm of the afternoon stuttered. Her emerald green eyes, usually so full of playful mischief, held a depth I hadn't noticed before. There was a directness in her gaze, a silent challenge, a knowing glint that seemed to strip away all pretense. It was a look that lingered, just a fraction of a second too long, holding me captive. My breath hitched. A jolt, like a low-voltage current, shot through me, It wasn't flirtatious in an obvious way, no wink or overt come-on. It was far more subtle, far more dangerous. It was an acknowledgement, a silent question, a recognition of something unspoken that now hummed between us. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden silence in my mind. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the moment vanished. Her gaze moved on, a bright, easy smile returning to her lips as she greeted Clara and David. She pulled out a chair directly opposite me, settling in with a graceful ease. "Marcus, good to see you," she said, her voice perfectly casual, as if nothing out of the ordinary had transpired. Her eyes, though, flickered back to mine for a split second, a subtle, almost imperceptible acknowledgement that the moment had indeed happened. "You too, Isabel," I managed, my voice a little rougher than I intended. I tried to compose myself, to push down the unsettling feeling that had just washed over me. What was that? I tried to rationalize it. A mistake, an accidental, lingering gaze. She was just being Isabel, charismatic and engaging. But the way her eyes had met mine, the subtle curve of her lips, it felt like anything but an accident. It felt like a choice. The rest of the lunch proceeded, outwardly as normal, but for me the comfortable rhythm had been irrevocably broken. I found myself acutely aware of Isabel's presence across the table. Every time she laughed, every time she spoke, every time her hand moved to reach for a serving spoon, my gaze was drawn to her. Sophia, oblivious, continued to chat happily, occasionally squeezing my hand under the table. Her touch, usually so comforting, now felt like a heavy weight, a reminder of the comfortable life I was suddenly questioning. Guilt, hot and heavy, began to settle in my stomach. Isabel, meanwhile, was a captivating conversationalist. She regaled us with stories from her latest photography assignment in Santa Fe, describing the vibrant colors of the desert and the eccentric artists she'd met. Her passion was infectious, her descriptions vivid, and I found myself genuinely engrossed, even as a part of my mind screamed warnings. At one point, as I reached for the gravy boat, my hand brushed against hers. It was a fleeting contact, a casual accident in the crowded space of the table, but the brief touch sent a fresh jolt through me. Our eyes met again, and for a split second, a silent understanding passed between us. Her lips curved into that subtle, enigmatic smile again, and I felt a blush creep up my neck. Sophia, noticing my flushed face, chuckled. "Are you okay, Marcus? You're looking a little red. Is Eleanor's gravy too rich for you?" No, it's perfect," I stammered, trying to compose myself. "Just warm in here." Isabel's smile widened, a hint of amusement dancing in her emerald eyes. She said nothing, but her gaze held mine for a moment longer than strictly necessary, a silent acknowledgement of the current that had just passed between us. The rest of the meal was a blur of forced smiles and internal panic. I ate sparingly, my appetite gone. The delicious food, which I usually devoured, tasted like ash in my mouth. My mind was a relentless loop, replaying Isabel's look, her touch, her subtle smile. Was I overthinking it? Was I creating a drama where none existed? Or had I just been initiated into a secret, unspoken game? As the plates were cleared and Eleanor brought out the apple pie, Isabel leaned back in her chair, her gaze sweeping over the room. "This is lovely, Eleanor," she said, her voice warm. "Always such a treat to come home." Her eyes, as they passed over me, lingered for a fraction of a second, a subtle, almost imperceptible acknowledgement that the home she spoke of now held a new, dangerous dimension for me. Later, as the afternoon began to wane and guests started to prepare for departure, I found myself helping Arthur carry some dishes to the kitchen. Sophia was in the living room, chatting with Clara. Isabel was by the bay window, looking out at the fading light, a pensive expression on her face. As I walked past her carrying a stack of plates, she turned, her eyes meeting mine. "Beautiful sunset, isn't it?" she murmured, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Yeah," I replied, my voice a little rough. "It is." She turned back to the window, but as I continued past, her hand, cool and soft, brushed against my arm. It wasn't a fleeting touch, a casual accident. It was deliberate. Her fingers lingered, just for a fraction of a second too long, tracing a path from my elbow down to my wrist. A jolt, like a low-voltage current, shot through me. My breath hitched. The world, which had been humming along predictably, suddenly stuttered. Time seemed to stretch, distorting the simple act into something monumental. Her touch was light, almost imperceptible, yet it felt like a brand, searing itself onto my skin. into my very consciousness. My eyes, which had been following her movement, snapped back to hers. Her emerald eyes, usually so composed, held a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it curiosity, challenge, or something far more dangerous? A subtle, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips, a secret shared only between us. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the moment vanished. Her hand moved away, her gaze returning to the sunset, leaving me frozen, my arm tingling, my mind reeling. This was Sophia's cousin, the woman who had been a part of our family for years, the woman I had always seen as a vibrant but ultimately harmless relative. And in one brief electric moment, she had shattered the comfortable boundaries of that relationship. 1,000 questions flooded my mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Was I imagining things? Was I projecting something onto an innocent gesture? Or had I just been initiated into a secret, unspoken game? My hands, still clutching the stack of plates, felt heavy, forgotten. All I could focus on was the lingering sensation on my arm, the image of Isabel's eyes, and the unsettling knowledge that something fundamental had shifted. As I placed the plates in the sink, Eleanor walked in, humming a cheerful tune. "Oh, Marcus, thank you so much for helping. You're always such a dear." I managed a weak smile, my mind still reeling. "No problem, Eleanor." I glanced back at the living room. Isabel was now engaged in conversation with Sophia, her head tilted, her laughter light and carefree. She looked completely innocent, completely oblivious to the storm she had just unleashed within me. The contrast was jarring, almost surreal. Later, as Sophia and I drove home, the comfortable silence of our car felt heavy, laden with my unspoken turmoil. Sophia, sensing my continued distraction, grew quiet, her earlier cheerfulness replaced by a subtle concern. "You're very quiet tonight, honey," she said softly, reaching for my hand. "Everything okay?" I squeezed her hand, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just a long day, and all that food made me sleepy." She nodded, but her gaze was searching, and for a moment I thought she saw right through me. But then she sighed, leaning her head against the window. "Okay, just tell me if something's bothering you, okay? You know you can talk to me." "I know," I said, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. How could I talk to her about this? How could I tell her that her cousin, the woman she loved like a sister, had just ignited a spark of confusion and forbidden desire within me? It was unthinkable. I drove back to our house, the city's neon glow doing little to dispel the darkness in my mind. The moment I stepped through our door, the silence of our home felt oppressive. I threw my keys onto the counter, stripped off my clothes, and collapsed onto our bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind was a relentless loop, replaying Isabel's touch, her gaze, her subtle smile. Temptation doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Her look had been a whisper, soft and insidious, and it had burrowed deep into my consciousness. The thought of it being a flirtation, however subtle, sent a jolt of something akin to fear, but also a strange, undeniable thrill through me. Isabel was a beautiful woman, undeniably attractive, with a vibrant charm that was intoxicating. But she was Sophia's cousin. The very idea was a betrayal, a line I wouldn't cross. Yet the seed had been planted, and it was already beginning to sprout. My relationship with Sophia, once a clear, well-lit path, now felt like it had a sudden, dark detour, a hidden fork in the road I hadn't seen coming. And the person who had pointed me towards it was the last person I ever would have expected. I knew with a chilling certainty that I was playing with fire, and the terrifying part was I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to stop. The comfortable stability of my life had been replaced by a thrilling, dangerous uncertainty, and I was, against my better judgment, drawn deeper into its intoxicating current. The days following that Sunday lunch were a blur of internal turmoil. Isabel's look, her fleeting touch had burrowed deep into my consciousness, a persistent hum beneath the surface of my otherwise orderly life. The aroma of roasted chicken, once a symbol of comfort, now carried a faint, unsettling echo of that afternoon. My mind, usually sharp and focused on the intricate logic of code, was now a chaotic mess of replays and what-ifs. Sophia, my anchor, noticed the shift. Her usual bright demeanor was slowly being replaced by a quiet concern, a subtle withdrawal. Our evenings, once filled with easy conversation and shared laughter, became punctuated by my distracted silences and her searching glances. "You're really not yourself lately, Marcus," she said one Tuesday evening, as we sat on our sofa, a half-watched documentary playing on the TV. She leaned her head on my shoulder, a gesture that usually brought me immense comfort, but now felt like a heavy weight of unspoken expectation. "Is something bothering you? Work again?" I stiffened slightly, the guilt a hot flush spreading across my chest. "Yeah, just a particularly tricky bug I'm trying to squash," I lied, forcing a casual tone. "It's consuming my thoughts." She sighed, a small weary sound. "Okay, just remember I'm here for you no matter what. You know you can talk to me." Her unwavering loyalty, her genuine concern, only deepened the chasm of my guilt. I was a fraud, living a double life, even if the other life was currently confined to stolen glances and unspoken desires. The image of Isabel's emerald eyes, that knowing smile, was a constant, unwelcome guest in my mind, pushing Sophia's gentle presence further into the background. I tried to immerse myself in work, to drown out the noise in my head, but it was useless. Isabel was everywhere, in my thoughts, in my dreams, in the subtle scent of her perfume that seemed to cling to the memory of her touch. The comfortable predictability of my life was gone, replaced by a thrilling, terrifying uncertainty. A few days later, an unexpected opportunity, or perhaps a trap, arose. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text, and she looked up, a slight frown on her face. "Oh, Isabel's in town for a last-minute photography gig," Sophia explained, scrolling through her messages. "She needs to borrow Eleanor's old darkroom equipment for a project. Apparently it's the only place she can get the specific vintage look she's going for. Mom's out of town for a conference, and Arthur's got his golf tournament all weekend. She's asking if I can let her in and help her set up." My heart gave a jolt. Isabel alone at Eleanor and Arthur's house. My mind immediately went to the possibilities, the forbidden scenarios. A cold knot of dread and a surge of illicit excitement twisted in my gut. "Oh," I managed, trying to sound nonchalant. "That's convenient." Sophia sighed. "I know, right? But I have that big presentation for the new client on Saturday and I'm swamped with prep. I really can't spare the time." I feel bad, she's really counting on it. She looked at me, her blue eyes pleading. "Marcus, honey, could you possibly do it? Just let her in. Help her carry the boxes down to the basement. Maybe show her where everything is? It shouldn't take long." My breath hitched. An hour, maybe two, alone with Isabel, in the quiet, empty house. My conscience screamed, "No!" My loyalty to Sophia roared with warnings. But a darker, more primal part of me, the part that had been drawn to her from the beginning, whispered, yes. The temptation, once a whisper, was now a distinct, alluring murmur. Yeah, sure, Sophia," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, but I could feel my pulse quicken. "No problem. Happy to help out, Isabel." Sophia beamed, relief washing over her face. "Oh, thank you, honey. You're the best. I'll text her and tell her you'll meet her there around 11 tomorrow morning." As I hung up, my hand trembled slightly. This was it. A controlled environment, yes, but undeniably intimate. I spent the rest of the evening in a haze, my mind racing, rehearsing conversations, trying to anticipate what might happen. I even found myself picking out a shirt for tomorrow, agonizing over what to wear. It was ridiculous, I knew, but I couldn't help it. The next morning, the air was crisp and cool, a typical New England autumn day. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, but my internal landscape was anything but clear. As I drove to Eleanor and Arthur's house, the familiar anxiety returned, a cold knot in my gut. The house, bathed in the warm glow of the morning sun, looked inviting. Normal. Too normal. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself, to push down the unsettling thoughts. When I pulled into the driveway, Isabel's sleek black SUV was already there. My heart gave a familiar jolt. She was already inside, I presumed. I walked to the front door, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for the doorbell. The door opened almost immediately. Isabel stood there, a vision in faded denim overalls and a simple white t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked effortlessly beautiful, her emerald eyes sparkling with a hint of anticipation. "Marcus, you're a lifesaver," she said, her voice a low, husky murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. "Sophia told me you were coming. Thank you so much for this." "No problem at all, Isabel," I replied, trying to sound composed. "Happy to help." As I stepped inside, the door closing softly behind me, the subtle scent of her perfume, a different, more earthy fragrance than the one she wore at lunch, filled the quiet space. It was intoxicating, a sophisticated blend that was both alluring and dangerous. The house was silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. "The equipment is mostly in the attic," she explained, her voice perfectly calm, professional. "A few boxes of chemicals and paper are in the garage. I figured we could start with the attic stuff, bring it down to the basement darkroom." I nodded, my gaze fixed on her, unable to look away. The overalls, the messy bun, the directness of her gaze. It was all a deliberate performance, a silent seduction. Or was it just me projecting my own forbidden desires onto an innocent interaction? The ambiguity was maddening. "Okay," I managed, my voice barely audible. "Lead the way." She smiled, a slow, knowing curve of her lips that sent a fresh jolt through me. "Follow me." She led me up the stairs, her movements fluid and graceful. I followed, my eyes fixed on the sway of her body, the subtle curve of her back. Every step felt heavy, laden with unspoken meaning. We reached the attic door, a narrow, unassuming entrance at the end of the hallway. She opened it, revealing a dimly lit space filled with old furniture, dusty boxes, and forgotten treasures. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and dust. "They're over there," she said, pointing to a stack of heavy-looking cardboard boxes in a far corner. I walked towards them, my mind racing. This was it, the moment of truth. As I reached the boxes, I bent down to examine them. They were indeed heavy, filled with old photographic equipment, lenses, and developing trays. "Be careful," Isabel murmured, her voice close behind me. "Some of them are quite fragile." I felt her presence directly behind me, the warmth of her body, the subtle scent of her perfume. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. I straightened up, turning to face her. We were standing mere inches apart, the air between us crackling with an almost unbearable tension. Her eyes, those piercing emerald eyes, met mine. There was no pretense now, no subtle hints, just raw, undeniable invitation. She reached out, her hand gently touching my arm, her thumb stroking my bicep. The touch was soft, tender, yet it felt like a brand, searing itself onto my very soul. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her gaze never leaving mine. "You've been so quiet since Sunday, so distant." Her fingers traced the line of my arm, then moved to my hand, her touch sending shivers down my spine. "Tell me, darling, what's truly on your mind?" Her words, her touch, her proximity, it was all too much. My breath hitched. I could feel myself leaning in, drawn by an irresistible force, a moth to a dangerous flame. The guilt, the warnings, the image of Sophia, they all faded into the background, replaced by an overwhelming primal urge. "Isabel," I whispered, my voice hoarse, my eyes fixed on her lips. Before I could finish, she leaned in, her lips brushing against mine. It was a soft, tentative kiss at first, a question more than a statement. But then, as I responded, as my hands instinctively reached for her waist, pulling her closer, the kiss deepened. It was intoxicating, a rush of forbidden desire that consumed me, erasing everything else. Her lips were soft, warm, tasting of something sweet and dangerous. Her body pressed against mine, the thin fabric of her overalls a negligible barrier between us. The world tilted on its axis. Time seemed to stop, suspended in this illicit moment. The dusty attic, the forgotten boxes, the very fabric of my life. It all dissolved into a haze of sensation. Her fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, deepening the kiss, and I responded with an urgency that both thrilled and terrified me. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated passion, a surrender to a desire I had fought against for weeks. In that kiss, in that embrace, the comfortable predictability of my life shattered into a million pieces. The line had been crossed. The unspoken had been spoken. Then, as suddenly as it began, she pulled back, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Her eyes, wide and luminous, met mine. There was a flicker of something raw, something undeniably sensual, but also a hint of something else, regret, triumph. I couldn't tell. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. We shouldn't." Her words were a cruel irony, coming after what had just transpired. My mind, still reeling from the intoxicating rush, struggled to process them. "Isabel," she placed a finger on my lips, silencing me. "No, we can't. This is wrong." Her gaze was intense, searching mine. "You know it is." The sudden shift, the abrupt halt, left me disoriented, confused. One moment we were consumed by a forbidden passion. The next she was pulling back, invoking the very morality we had just transgressed. But, I started, my voice still hoarse. She shook her head, a small sad smile playing on her lips. Some desires, Marcus, however strong, are meant to remain unspoken, and some lines once crossed can never truly be uncrossed. She took a step back, creating a physical distance between us that felt like a chasm. Her eyes, though still holding that unreadable depth, now seemed to carry a hint of sorrow, a profound understanding of the consequences of our actions. The spell was broken. The intoxicating haze began to dissipate, replaced by a cold, hard dose of reality. Guilt, immense and crushing, washed over me, threatening to drown me. Sophia, her face, her trust, her love, it all flooded my mind, a torrent of remorse. What had I done? Isabel, her composure slowly returning, gestured vaguely towards the boxes. Perhaps we should just focus on these boxes after all. We have a lot to move. Her voice was now calm, almost detached, as if the last few minutes had never happened. I nodded, my mind reeling, my body still tingling from her touch. The air in the attic, once charged with desire, now felt heavy with unspoken regret. We spent the next hour in a strained silence, moving boxes down to the basement darkroom, my movements clumsy, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and self-loathing. Every time our hands brushed, every time I caught a glimpse of her, a fresh wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. The dark room in the basement was a small, windowless space, smelling faintly of old chemicals and damp concrete. As we set up the equipment, the confined space felt even more charged. Even Isabel, now focused on her task, moved with a professional efficiency, explaining the nuances of developing film. I listened, nodded, offered help where I could, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the kiss, her words, her sudden withdrawal. "There," she said, finally stepping back, wiping her hands on her overalls. "That should do it for now. Thank you, Marcus. I really couldn't have done this without you." She looked at me, her emerald eyes holding a flicker of that unreadable depth again. "You're a good man, Marcus." Her words, after what had just transpired, felt like a cruel twist of the knife. A good man? I was anything but. I was a man who had just betrayed his wife, his vows, his entire life in a dusty attic with her cousin. I should probably get going," I stammered, my voice hoarse. "Sophia will be wondering where I am." She nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving mine. A small, knowing smile played on her lips. "Of course. Give Sophia my love, and tell her I said thank you." I practically fled the house, the cool autumn air outside doing little to clear my head. I got into my car, my hands trembling as I started the engine. The comfortable predictability of my life was gone, shattered by a single deliberate look, and then by a forbidden kiss. Everything had changed. The title of this story, once a mysterious hook, was now a chilling reality. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of tears and self-recrimination. I knew with a terrifying certainty that I couldn't go back to Sophia as if nothing had happened. The betrayal was too profound, the guilt too immense. I had crossed a line, and there was no uncrossing it. If you're finding yourself as entangled in Marcus's dilemma as he is, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more gripping narratives like this one to life. The drive home after the attic encounter was a blur of raw emotion. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as if trying to hold on to a reality that was rapidly slipping away. The kiss, Isabel's sudden withdrawal, her cryptic words about unspoken desires and uncrossed lines, it all replayed in my mind. A tormenting loop. Guilt, immense and suffocating, washed over me, threatening to drown me in its depths. Sophia's face, her trusting smile, her unwavering love flashed before my eyes, each image a fresh stab of remorse. What had I done? How could I ever look her in the eye again? I pulled into our driveway, the familiar facade of our home now seeming to mock my internal chaos. The comfortable predictability of my life was gone, shattered into a million pieces by a single forbidden kiss. I walked through the front door, the silence of the house amplifying the frantic beat of my own heart. Sophia wasn't home yet, which was a small mercy. I needed time to compose myself, to try and piece together the fragments of my shattered composure. Sleep was a distant luxury that night. I tossed and turned, the image of Isabel's emerald eyes, her soft lips haunting my thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt her presence, heard her low, husky whisper. The comfortable stability of my life had been replaced by a thrilling, terrifying uncertainty, and I was, against my better judgment, drawn deeper into its intoxicating current, even as I hated myself for it. The following week was a torment. My work suffered immensely. Lines of code, once a logical puzzle I relished solving, now seemed like an impenetrable wall of gibberish. My colleagues noticed my distraction, my usually sharp focus replaced by a vacant stare. My boss, Mr. Henderson, even pulled me aside, his brow furrowed with concern. "Everything all right, Marcus?" he asked, his voice gentle. "You seem a bit off your game lately. Anything I can do?" No, I'm fine, Mr. Henderson," I stammered, forcing a smile. "Just a lot on my plate outside of work. I'll get back on track, I promise." He nodded, but his gaze was searching, and I knew he wasn't entirely convinced. The pressure, both internal and external, was mounting. Sophia, meanwhile, was growing increasingly frustrated with my distance. The wall between us, which had started as a subtle crack, was now a gaping chasm. Our conversations were strained, filled with my evasive answers and her quiet, heartbroken questions. "Marcus, please," she pleaded one evening, her voice laced with a raw vulnerability that twisted my gut. We were sitting at the kitchen island, a half-eaten dinner growing cold between us. "Tell me what's going on. You're not sleeping, you're barely eating, and you're miles away when we talk. I feel like I'm losing you." I looked at her, her beautiful face etched with pain, her blue eyes glistening with unshed tears. A fresh wave of guilt, so intense it was almost physical, washed over me. She deserved the truth, but how could I possibly tell her? How could I confess that I had betrayed her with her own cousin, the woman she loved like a sister? The shame was too great, the potential destruction too catastrophic. "Sophia, I'm so sorry," I managed, my voice thick with remorse. It's just a lot of pressure at work, and I've been feeling really overwhelmed. I haven't been fair to you." The lie tasted like ash, but it was the only one I could offer. She shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "It feels like more than that, Marcus. It feels like you're pulling away from me. Is there someone else?" Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with a fragile hope that I would deny it. My heart hammered against my ribs. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to scream, "No!" to vehemently deny it. But the memory of Isabel's lips on mine, her body pressed against mine, was too vivid, too real. "No, Sophia, of course not," I lied, perhaps too quickly, too vehemently. "There's no one else. It's just me. I'm a mess right now. I need to figure things out." She looked at me, her gaze searching, and for a moment I thought she saw right through me. But then her expression hardened slightly, a flicker of resignation in her eyes. "Okay," she said, her voice quiet, distant. "Just, please, figure it out soon, Marcus, because I don't know how much more of this I can take." The conversation ended in a tense silence, a chasm opening between us that felt wider than ever before. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to give. The comfortable stability of our marriage was eroding, crumbling under the weight of my secret. Isabel, surprisingly, went silent after our encounter in the attic. No texts, no calls, no lingering glances. It was as if the entire episode had been a fever dream, a hallucination. But the emptiness in my life, the gnawing guilt, and the profound sense of loss were all too real. Her absence, however, was almost as tormenting as her presence. It left me wondering, questioning, replaying every moment, trying to decipher her true intentions. Was it a test, a game, or had she genuinely regretted it? Just as I was beginning to hope that the storm might pass, that Isabel might simply fade back into the periphery of our family life, another family event loomed. Eleanor and Arthur's 40th wedding anniversary, a big celebration, a formal dinner at a country club, with all the extended family invited. There was no way to avoid it. The thought of seeing Isabel again, of being in the same room under the watchful eyes of our family, sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me, but I also felt a strange, undeniable pull, a dangerous curiosity. I wanted to see her, to gauge her reaction, to see if the spark was still there or if it had been extinguished by regret. The day of the anniversary arrived, a crisp Saturday evening. Sophia was excited, bustling around the house, choosing her dress, her jewelry. She had chosen a stunning emerald green gown, a color that ironically reminded me of Isabel's eyes. The sight of it twisted a knot in my stomach. "How do I look?" Sophia asked, twirling in front of me, her face alight with anticipation. "Beautiful," I managed, the word feeling hollow. Absolutely beautiful. As we drove to the country club, the tension in the car was palpable, at least on my end. Sophia, dressed elegantly, chatted about the guest list, the menu, the band. I listened, nodded, offered appropriate responses, but my mind was elsewhere, bracing myself for the inevitable encounter. The country club ballroom was a vision of elegance, sparkling chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, and the soft glow of candlelight. The air was filled with the murmur of conversation, the clinking of glasses and the soft strains of a jazz band. Eleanor and Arthur, looking radiant, greeted guests at the entrance. Sophia immediately gravitated towards her parents, pulling me along. I offered my congratulations, my smile feeling stiff, a mask I was struggling to keep in place. My gaze, however, was already scanning the room, searching. And then I saw her, Isabel. She was standing by the bar talking to Clara and David, a glass of champagne in her hand. She was wearing a sleek floor-length black dress, its simple elegance accentuating her figure. Her dark, wavy hair was pulled back in a sophisticated updo, and her emerald eyes, sparkling under the chandeliers, seemed to draw all the light in the room. She looked breathtaking, a vision of effortless sophistication. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a fleeting moment, the noise of the party faded, the music dimmed, and the world seemed to narrow to just the two of us. That familiar, unreadable glint was there in her eyes, a spark of something that seemed to acknowledge our shared secret. A subtle, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips, a silent question, a dangerous invitation. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the moment vanished. Her gaze moved on, a bright, easy smile returning to her lips as she laughed at something David said. She gave no outward sign of the electric current that had just passed between us. She was a master of composure, a skilled player in a game I was only just beginning to understand. Sophia, oblivious, tugged my arm. "Come on, Marcus. Let's go say hello to Aunt Carol." I nodded, forcing myself to move, to engage, to pretend that my world hadn't just been rocked by a single glance. The rest of the evening was a torment. I tried my best to engage, to be present, but every now and then my gaze would drift back to Isabel. She moved through the room with an easy confidence, chatting with guests, her laughter light and melodic. She seemed completely at ease, completely unaffected. At one point during the toasts, I found myself standing near her. Sophia was on my other side, holding my hand, her attention fixed on Arthur's heartfelt speech. Isabel, just a few feet away, raised her glass, her eyes meeting mine over the rim. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement that only I seemed to perceive. It was a small gesture, but it sent a fresh jolt through me, a confirmation that the spark was still there, simmering beneath the surface. Later, as the band started playing and people began to dance, Sophia pulled me onto the dance floor. We moved together, a familiar rhythm, a comfortable embrace. But even as I held my wife, my eyes kept drifting towards Isabel, who was now dancing with Clara, her movements fluid and graceful. As the song ended, Sophia excused herself to the ladies' room. I found myself standing alone by the edge of the dance floor, a glass of champagne in my hand. Suddenly, a presence beside me, Isabel. "Having fun?" she asked, her voice a low murmur, barely audible over the music. She was standing close, her arm brushing lightly against mine. The subtle scent of her perfume, that earthy, alluring fragrance, enveloped me. "It's a beautiful celebration," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The proximity was overwhelming. "It is," she agreed, her eyes fixed on the dancers. "Eleanor and Arthur have built something truly special, haven't they?" Her words, seemingly innocuous, carried a subtle double meaning, a hint of something deeper. I nodded, unable to speak. My heart hammered against my ribs. She turned to me, her emerald eyes holding mine. "You've been very quiet tonight, Marcus. Still troubled?" Her voice was softer now, more intimate, a dangerous whisper in the crowded room. "It's complicated," I managed, my voice a whisper. She smiled, a slow, knowing curve of her lips. "Life often is, especially when you find yourself at a crossroads you never expected." Her words echoed Victoria's from my previous story, a chilling reminder of the path I was on. "Sometimes, Marcus, the most important lessons come from the most unexpected places, don't they?" Her hand, cool and soft, reached out and gently touched my arm, her fingers tracing a path from my elbow down to my wrist. It was a light touch, almost imperceptible, but it sent a wave of heat through me, a jolt of forbidden desire. My breath hitched. The world, which had been humming along predictably, suddenly stuttered. "Isabel," I began, my voice hoarse, unsure of what I was going to say. Was I going to confront her? To confess my own confusion? She leaned in slightly, her lips brushing against my ear, her voice a soft, dangerous murmur. "Just enjoy the moment, Marcus. Sometimes that's all we have." Her breath, warm against my skin, sent shivers down my spine. Just as the tension reached its peak, a cheerful voice cut through the quiet. "Marcus, there you are. I was looking for you." Sophia. She was walking towards us, a bright smile on her face, completely oblivious to the charged moment she had just interrupted. Isabel immediately withdrew her hand, her expression shifting instantly, the enigmatic glint in her eyes replaced by a warm, friendly smile. "Sophia, just catching up with Marcus," Isabel said, her voice perfectly composed, betraying no hint of the electric current that had just passed between us. "You look absolutely stunning tonight, by the way. That dress is incredible on you." Sophia beamed, genuinely pleased by the compliment. "Thanks, Isabel, you too. That black dress is gorgeous." She wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me closer. "Ready for another dance, honey?" "Always," I managed, forcing a smile. I glanced at Isabel, who was now smiling warmly at her cousin, her face a mask of innocent affection. The contrast was jarring, almost surreal. As Sophia pulled me back onto the dance floor, I felt Isabel's gaze on my back, a lingering presence that sent a fresh shiver down my spine. The music, once a backdrop to our comfortable life, now felt like a soundtrack to my unraveling. I was caught in a dangerous dance, a silent seduction that threatened to unravel my entire life. The guilt was immense, a heavy weight on my conscience. But beneath the guilt, a dangerous curiosity simmered. What would happen next? How far would this go? I knew with a chilling certainty that I was playing with fire, and the terrifying part was, I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to stop. The comfortable stability of my life had been replaced by a thrilling, dangerous uncertainty, and I was, against my better judgment, drawn deeper into its intoxicating current. The crossroads Isabel had spoken of were no longer in the distance. I was standing right in the middle of them, and the path forward was shrouded in a tantalizing, terrifying darkness. If you're as captivated by Marcus's predicament as I am, make sure to show your support. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the dramatic conclusion of this story. Your engagement helps us create more compelling narratives like this one. The drive home after Eleanor and Arthur's anniversary party was a silent, suffocating journey. Sophia, sensing my continued distance, had retreated into a quiet, wounded silence. The elegant emerald green dress she wore, once a symbol of her radiance, now felt like a cruel irony. Its color, a constant reminder of Isabel's piercing eyes. My mind was a whirlwind of self-loathing and a dangerous, undeniable thrill. Isabel's whispered words, her fleeting touch, her knowing gaze across the dance floor, they had solidified the truth. The game was far from over, and I was, against every fiber of my being, still playing. The days that followed were a torment. The comfortable rhythm of our marriage had been replaced by a jarring discord. Sophia's patience, once boundless, had finally worn thin. Her questions were no longer gentle inquiries, but sharp, pointed demands for honesty. "Marcus, I can't do this anymore," she said one morning, her voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and anger. We were in the kitchen, the aroma of coffee doing little to soothe the tension. "You're a ghost in our own home. You're distant, distracted, and you look utterly miserable. What is going on? Is there someone else? Just tell me the truth, please." Her blue eyes, usually so full of warmth, were now clouded with pain and suspicion. My heart hammered against my ribs. The truth, raw and ugly, hovered on my tongue, but the words wouldn't come. The shame was too immense, the potential destruction too catastrophic. "Sophia, I'm so sorry," I stammered, my voice thick with remorse. "There's no one else, I swear, it's just work. And I've been really struggling with some personal things. I haven't been fair to you, and I know that." She shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I don't believe you, Marcus. Not anymore. I feel it. Something has changed, and if you can't be honest with me, then I don't know what we're doing." Her voice cracked, and she turned away, walking out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the bitter taste of my lies. Her words echoed in the silent house, a chilling premonition of the inevitable. Our marriage, once a fortress, was now crumbling, brick by painful brick. and I was the architect of its destruction. Isabel surprisingly remained silent. No texts, no calls, no subtle hints. It was as if she had vanished, leaving me alone to grapple with the wreckage she had helped create. Her absence, however, was almost as tormenting as her presence. It left me wondering, questioning, replaying every moment, trying to decipher her true intentions. Was she testing me, waiting for me to make the next move, or had she genuinely regretted our illicit kiss, deciding to retreat? The ambiguity was maddening, fueling my internal conflict. I hated myself for what I had done, for the pain I was causing Sophia, but beneath the guilt, a dangerous curiosity still simmered, a forbidden flame that refused to be extinguished. Then, a week later, the silence broke. A text message, simple and direct, from Isabel. "Marcus, I need to pick up a few more things from the dark room at Eleanor's. Could you meet me there around 4 p.m? I'm having trouble with the heavy equipment again, and Arthur's still out of town." My heart leaped into my throat. 4 p.m. Arthur out of town. Sophia would be at her late-day client meeting. It was an invitation, thinly veiled, but an invitation nonetheless. My conscience screamed no. My loyalty to Sophia roared with warnings, but a darker, more primal part of me, the part that had been drawn to her from the beginning, whispered yes. The temptation, once a whisper, was now a distinct, alluring roar. I typed a quick reply, my fingers trembling. "Sure, Isabel, I'll be there." The hours leading up to 4 p.m. were agonizing. I tried to work, but my mind was a whirlwind. Guilt and anticipation battled within me, a brutal war for my soul. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was walking into a situation that could destroy everything, but I couldn't stop myself. The curiosity, the forbidden thrill was too powerful. At exactly 4 o'clock, I pulled up to Eleanor and Arthur's house. Isabel's sleek black SUV was already there. My heart gave a familiar jolt. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart, and walked to the front door. The door opened almost immediately. Isabel stood there, a vision in a fitted dark green sweater and jeans, her dark hair loose, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. Her emerald eyes, sparkling with a hint of anticipation, met mine. There was no pretense, no subtle hints this time, just raw, undeniable invitation. "Marcus," she said, her voice a low, husky murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. "Thank you for coming. I really appreciate this." "No problem at all, Isabel," I replied, trying to sound composed. "Happy to help." As I stepped inside, the door closing softly behind me, the subtle scent of her perfume, that earthy, alluring fragrance, filled the quiet space. The house was silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows, creating an almost ethereal glow. "The last few boxes are in the darkroom," she explained, her voice perfectly calm, professional. "Just need to get them into my car." I nodded, my gaze fixed on her, unable to look away. The fitted sweater, the loose hair, the directness of her gaze. It was all a deliberate performance, a silent seduction. Or was it just me projecting my own forbidden desires onto an innocent interaction? The ambiguity was maddening. "Okay," I managed, my voice barely audible. "Lead the way." She smiled, a slow, knowing curve of her lips that sent a fresh jolt through me. "Follow me." She led me down to the basement, the air growing cooler, heavier with the scent of old chemicals. The darkroom, a small windowless space, felt even more confined, more intimate. A few heavy cardboard boxes were stacked in the corner. "These are the last of them," she said, gesturing towards the boxes, mostly old prints and some equipment. I walked towards them, my mind racing. This was it, the moment of truth. As I reached the boxes, I bent down to examine them. They were indeed heavy. "Be careful," Isabel murmured, her voice close behind me. "Some of them are quite fragile." I felt her presence directly behind me, the warmth of her body, the subtle scent of her perfume. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. I straightened up, turning to face her. We were standing mere inches apart, the air between us crackling with an almost unbearable tension. Her eyes, those piercing emerald eyes, met mine. There was no ambiguity now, no subtle hints, just raw, undeniable desire. She reached out, her hand gently touching my cheek, her thumb stroking my skin. The touch was soft, tender, yet it felt like a brand, searing itself onto my very soul. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her gaze never leaving mine. "You've been so troubled, so lost. Her fingers traced the line of my jaw, then moved to the nape of my neck, her touch sending shivers down my spine. "Tell me, darling, what's truly on your mind?" Her words, her touch, her proximity, it was all too much. My breath hitched. I could feel myself leaning in, drawn by an irresistible force, a moth to a dangerous flame. The guilt, the warnings, the image of Sophia, they all faded into the background, replaced by an overwhelming primal urge. "Isabel," I whispered, my voice hoarse, my eyes fixed on her lips. Before I could finish, she leaned in, her lips brushing against mine. It was a soft, tentative kiss at first, a question more than a statement. But then as I responded, as my hands instinctively reached for her waist, pulling her closer, the kiss deepened. It was intoxicating, a rush of forbidden desire that consumed me, erasing everything else. Her lips were soft, warm, tasting of something sweet and dangerous. Her body pressed against mine, the thin fabric of her sweater a negligible barrier between us. The world tilted on its axis. Time seemed to stop, suspended in this illicit moment. The dusty darkroom, the forgotten equipment, the very fabric of my life, it all dissolved into a haze of sensation. Her fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, deepening the kiss, and I responded with an urgency that both thrilled and terrified me. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated passion, a surrender to a desire I had fought against for weeks. In that kiss, in that embrace, the comfortable predictability of my life shattered into a million pieces. The line had been crossed. The unspoken had been spoken. This time there was no pulling back, no sudden withdrawal, no cryptic words about regret. This time the kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more demanding. My hands moved from her waist, tracing the curve of her back, pulling her even closer. Her fingers tangled in my hair, her body pressing against mine, a silent affirmation of our shared, forbidden desire. We stumbled backward, away from the boxes until my back hit the cold, concrete wall of the darkroom. The sudden impact brought a jolt of reality, but it was quickly subsumed by the overwhelming passion. Her lips were everywhere, my neck, my jaw, my ear, whispering my name, a soft, dangerous murmur that ignited every nerve ending. The world outside the darkroom, the world of Sophia, of routine, of loyalty, ceased to exist. There was only Isabel, her intoxicating scent, her soft skin, her urgent kisses. In that moment, in that confined, dusty space, I surrendered completely to the temptation, to the dangerous current that had been pulling me under for weeks. Just as the passion reached its peak, a sudden jarring sound echoed from upstairs, the front door, opening. My blood ran cold. Isabel froze, her head snapping up, her eyes wide with sudden dawning horror. We pulled apart, gasping for breath, our bodies trembling, our faces flushed with a mixture of passion and terror. "Sophia," I whispered, my voice hoarse, barely audible. Isabel's eyes, usually so composed, were now filled with a raw, primal fear. She must have finished her meeting early. Footsteps. Light, familiar footsteps moving across the floorboards upstairs. Then the sound of her voice, bright and cheerful, calling out, "Isabel, Marcus, are you guys down here?" Sophia. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure panic. The intoxicating haze of desire evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, hard dose of reality. Guilt, immense and crushing, washed over me, threatening to drown me. Sophia, her face, her trust, her love, it all flooded my mind, a torrent of remorse. What had I done? Isabel, her face pale, her eyes still wide with terror, grabbed my arm. "Marcus, we have to—" But it was too late. The footsteps were on the basement stairs. The light from the hallway spilled into the darkroom, as Sophia appeared at the bottom of the steps, her emerald green dress shimmering in the dim light. Her eyes, initially filled with a cheerful curiosity, widened in disbelief as she took in the scene before her. Isabel, disheveled, her lips swollen from our kiss, standing inches from me, my own disheveled appearance, my flushed face, my trembling hands. The unspoken truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Sophia's gaze flickered from Isabel to me, her face draining of all color. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Her eyes, once filled with love and trust, now held a look of profound, heartbreaking betrayal. The emerald green dress, a cruel irony, seemed to mock the scene. "Sophia," I began, my voice a broken whisper, reaching out a hand. She flinched, recoiling as if I had struck her. A single tear, large and luminous, rolled down her cheek. Her gaze, filled with a pain so deep it was almost unbearable, was fixed on me. "How could you, Marcus?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, raw with agony. "How could you with her?" Her words, filled with a pain that ripped through my very soul, were the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. The comfortable predictability of my life was gone, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Everything had changed. The title of this story, once a mysterious hook, was now a chilling, devastating reality. Isabel, silent and pale, stood frozen beside me, her own guilt now etched on her face. The game was over, and we had both lost. Sophia turned, her shoulders shaking, and slowly, deliberately, walked back up the basement stairs, her footsteps echoing in the sudden, deafening silence. The light from the hallway disappeared as she ascended, leaving Isabel and me in the dim, chemical-scented darkness of the darkroom, alone with our shame and the wreckage of our choices. I stood there, paralyzed, the ghost of Isabel's kiss still on my lips, the searing pain of Sophia's betrayal burning in my heart. The comfortable stability of my life was gone, replaced by a raw, painful uncertainty. I had lost Sophia, lost her trust, and in doing so, I had lost a part of myself. The man who had waited on that sofa, calm and distracted, was gone, replaced by someone scarred, someone who understood the darker, more complicated currents that ran beneath the surface of human relationships. The path forward was unclear, shrouded in a tantalizing, terrifying darkness. But one thing was certain: I would never look at a casual glance, a lingering touch, or a quiet invitation the same way again. The world, once a place of clear boundaries, was now a complex, morally ambiguous landscape, and I was left to navigate it alone with the heavy weight of my choices. The whisper of temptation had become a roar, and its echo would haunt me forever. And that concludes our story. If Marcus's journey through this tangled web of desire and betrayal resonated with you, please show your support. Hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on our next compelling narrative. Your engagement helps us continue creating stories that explore the depths of human experience. Thank you for watching.